I, 33F, feel embarrassed when my husband, 36M, is rude to others. My husband has a tendency to be grumpy and often that comes out as rudeness/sharpness. I can mostly handle it when it's directed at me, but I get incredibly uncomfortable if it's at or in the presence of others. If I bring it up to him, he gets defensive and tells me he is not being rude. I understand that rudeness is my perception, but it still really bothers me to be associated with it. I believe my husband when he says that he doesn't think he is being rude intentionally, but I also don't think that means the behavior isn't generally perceived by most people as rude. X. Not using please, can you/would you, upset tone of voice, walking off when angry, etc. How would you guys handle this? We don't see eye to eye and I don't know what to do. I'm not sure that I can just let it go as the behavior really bothers me. I wouldn't be comfortable with someone who was often rude and sharp with me. Rudeness isn't a perception. Not saying please, using an upset tone of voice, walking off when angry, especially when done in public or with strangers, are rude behaviors as a common standard. Your husband isn't open to your feedback if he tells you he isn't being rude when he is. So I guess, much as I hate to say this, that your choices are to put up with this and distance yourself emotionally from his behavior, or leave him, or keep working on him until he assents to your POV, which I agree with. I would note _specific examples that you see as they happen, and then later privately, sit him down and explain how those instances make you feel. If he's willing to work on it, that's great, but you need to see marked improvement in actions, not just words. I don't fuck with people who are rude to others in public. One of my few hard lines. If you didn't see major changes very quickly, I'd personally move along. This is helpful. And this behavior isn't necessarily new, but in the past I wore rose-colored glasses in regards to our relationship. He can also be really supportive and loving towards me when he's in a good mood, so I think I would get over things because of that. I have been working in myself and my boundaries a lot, and I am coming to a place where I realize that all the nice doesn't just neutralize this aspect that really bothers me anymore. We don't have children yet, but I have a hard time envisioning happily raising a family with someone that seems to have a chip on their shoulder. I don't want my kids to look at the world that way. My grandfather is similar, and I honestly don't know how my grandma has put up with it for so long. I can see how much it hurts her, although she would never say it out loud. Now I'm trying to figure out if this is something that can be improved on, or if I am expecting him to change more than is reasonable. I'm going to give you some wonderful advice my mom gave me many years ago. It has saved me numerous times in relationships. Anything that bothers you now, in your relationship, will only bother you 20 times more in 2 years. What he is doing bothers you. Imagine how much it will bother you 2 years from now. It's time to reevaluate your relationship, because I can promise you that being grumpy isn't an excuse for being a straight-up a-hole. Please, as someone who was a food server, keep him at home. There is no excuse for being rude. He's not grumpy. I'm in a bad mood sometimes, but I still show other humans basic kindness. My boyfriend is like this. I've come to see his intention isn't to be rude, he's just sort of short with people and he gets overwhelmed or anxious sometimes and comes off snippety. We talk about it quite a bit. I've explained a few times why the way he says things would make someone feel bad. Sometimes I've repeated back to him things he's said. He's come around a lot and actually asks me after interactions if he did okay. He's a lot more patient now. I guess I had to make it clear that it doesn't matter if he thinks it's rude or not, he's hurting people's feelings. He doesn't want to hurt people's feelings. The ability to self-reflect and create positive change for yourself is awesome. Kudos to both of you! ! Boyfriend has been living with me for a month and a half and now refuses to pay his half of rent. I, 19F, moved out and started renting an apartment in November of 2020. In February of 2021, my boyfriend, 21 meters, moved into the apartment with me due to his own circumstances requiring him to move. He had no job, so when he moved in we agreed that he wouldn't have to pay rent until he got a job, and once he got a job he'd have to pay half the rent and electricity. That seemed fair to me, and he agreed to it. Not too long after he moved in, he got a job, and had said job for almost a month now. Today being the first, rent is obviously due. So I texted him and asked if he could Venmo me his half of the rent, and instead of just a simple yes, he asked to talk about it when he got home from work. I said okay I guess, but what is there to talk about? He said that since he's not happy with the apartment, it's decorated to my liking. Since I lived there for 4 to 5 months first, there was a hot water issue which has since been fixed, and a few other things. He wanted to look at other apartments, which we have been, and planned on breaking our lease because of the hot water issue, but can't anymore since they fixed it. He couldn't pay rent. Keep in mind he has been bragging for months about how much he has in his savings because we have very different spending habits. I guess what I'm asking is, what do I do? He finally agreed to Venmo me the money with a bit of attitude, but I have yet to receive the Venmo. Am I asking too much of him? Am I assuming unfair things? I didn't think half of the rent was too much to ask because he's living there full time, and I didn't think half the electricity was too much to ask either because he plays video games on his PC quite a bit, and often forgets to turn lights off around the apartment, whereas I'm very anal about turning all unused lights off. Rent covers all other utilities. Please help. Edit. Here's an update after a long discussion and lots of crying. I'm not sure many of you will be too happy since a lot of you suggested we break up, but I didn't want to just give up and take an easy out over something that could have been a misunderstanding, which is exactly what it was. He was at work when the text conversation went down, so he was responding when he could and responding as fast as he could so as not to get in trouble. When he said he didn't want to pay rent, he meant that he didn't want to Venmo me today because he gets paid tomorrow, so he wanted to wait until tomorrow. But also a lot of you are right and I have been missing a lot of red flags. I brought them up, and we sat down and had a long conversation about all of it. Our conclusion was that he is going to find his own place and move out, and we will see how the relationship progresses from there, and when my lease is up we will reevaluate and determine if it's healthy for me to move into his place or if I need to continue to live on my own. A lot of you were concerned about my codependency issues and whether or not I'm getting therapy for it. I see a therapist once a week, and have been working for a long time on my issues. I had a very rough childhood filled with abuse of every kind, eating disorders, and a multitude of mental issues passed down genetically as well. I sought out the worst men I could and it led to a lot more issues. I have definitely gotten better, but codependency isn't something you fix overnight. I know it's not the update a lot of you wanted, but I hate giving up, and to me I didn't think this was something to break up over. He did Venmo me the money, and my rent is paid. As of right now, we're watching a movie and trying to wind down. Thank you to those of you who offered kind words, and thank you to those of you who offered advice. And fuck you to those of you who offered harsh words and even took time out of your day to private message me hurtful things. I may be a softie and I may try my best to be gentle and kind, but I don't and won't put up with that. What the fuck? He moved into your apartment. Of course it's decorated to your liking. That's not a reason to not share the rent. You get the money and tell him he can move out until you both find a place together that's to both your liking. You're not a fucking homeless shelter. Tell him to pay up or move out. If you're living together, shared expenses and rent are a fair deal. That an apartment isn't entirely decorated to his liking is a lame excuse, as well as the heater not working. If he's already having this much difficulties keeping his word early on, I would advise against renting something together already. You have only been living together since February and he's already giving you shit about carrying his weight. Imagine what it will be like a few years down the road. Things could get much worse. He needs to 1. Pay rent, or 2. Move out. It's just that simple. Tell him to move out. I, 33F, think my son, 16, may be gay. Just some background info: I've been a single mother my whole life, and I have my one boat a day. I fucked up a son, who shall remain nameless, that I love very much. My son has his friends over quite often, and I would say I am fairly close with all of them. They all seem very comfortable around me, which is kinda my goal. But him and his friends have always acted gay towards each other, which I've just always seen as them just messing around and stuff. Especially because I've seen on TikTok the jokes where it's about acting gay around the boys. And just to add, if he is LGBTQ+, I would have no problem with it at all. But earlier, he left his phone on the table and he got a message. And normally I'm not nosy and I don't go through his phone. But for whatever reason it just caught my attention and I read it. It was by a boy that I have never heard of before, and the text was a little romantic/sexual. So I stopped reading in case it was personal. So I was wondering if I should maybe ask him about the message, or just act like it never happened, or maybe start throwing in some hints that I 100% support the LGBTQ+ community and I would support him too if he came out as LGBTQ+. Because the text was from someone I've never heard him talk about, and it just feels different. It doesn't sound like how his friends text him. But he also has never seemed gay. So maybe I just have a bias in my head that I should try to get rid of. But nonetheless, this hasn't changed how I see him, and I love him just as much, and he means the world to me and I don't know what I would do without him. He's my best friend. So any advice would be appreciated. Edit, this got a lot bigger than I expected, and I was going to try to reply to everyone, but there are too many comments to reply to everyone. But I have read every single notification that I got in my inbox. Definitely don't say anything about the message because even coming from a place of love you shouldn't have read the text. Let him figure it out in his own time. 2 hearts. Let him figure it out on his own. Just make sure he knows that you love and accept him no matter what and you will be doing the best thing you can for him. I just want to make sure that he knows that I love him and I will support him no matter what, but I don't want to overdo it, you know? Just love him. Leave him alone. Don't start overdoing support of LGBTQ+. Just be. He'll talk when he's ready. Alright. I just know how hard it can be to come out. And I also know how hard it is for him to talk with me about personal issues. So I just want to make sure I do as much for him as I can without doing too much. Thanks, smile. I would leave him alone for sure. At 16 I was starting to believe I wasn't heterosexual, but I wasn't entirely sure. I'm openly bi now BTW. Bringing it up might confuse him. Let him explore it on his own if he is a part of the LGBTQ+ community. They always say the mother knows before anyone does, so I would definitely wait until he brings it up if he ever does. I'm glad you're supportive. That honesty makes the world. You sound like a lovely mother, open-minded and very willing to learn. Smile. If you want to subtly hint that you're okay with it, don't overdo it. For instance, if you happen to see like a commercial or a show with a gay couple, you could say something very simple and quick like, "Oh, they're such a cute couple." And don't dwell on it, really. That kind of subtlety is okay. Honestly, don't do anything direct. Let him come to you with it. If you haven't had the talk with him yet, make sure you do so. Keep a box of condoms under the sink for him. Make sure he knows that safe sex is always important. And make sure he knows he can come to you with questions and stuff. Hey, if you ever have any questions, ask me. And if it's too uncomfortable to ask face to face, then ask me in a text or something like that. We've already had the talk. And another Redditor also recommended keeping condoms under the sink. Is this just a common thing?